what I'd like to do now is just kind of go around the room and share what are the problems that are solved and what are the top 3 problems that we're going to tackle going forward.
Everybody doesn't want to try VR for the first time, and there's usually a slow introduction to that process.
So I think it's a nice way to introduce people to this new way of gameplay.
What matters the most, especially when this technology is getting sort of started,
broaden audience or further engage that audience. And that's the experimentation I think we're going to have to do to figure that out.
That's where we have to, as an industry, put our time to develop those standards.
I need to walk into the park and walk out of the park and go get lunch and come back and walk back in the park without this huge onboarding thing that they got to do. Just give me a headset and I walk in there.
So it's great where you can go and you can have a high-priced experience.
45-minute adventures. At the end of the experience, we hope that the visitors will learn something.
If you can't step to the IP like enormously, I would stay away from it because you're going to underwhelm the audiences. They have so much passion in their IP.
It's very easy to fall into the trap if we create a VR experience, especially about the historic side. How not to make a documentary movie where you can walk in.
Talking about STEAM. Hey, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math is awesome, but art, STEAM, to add the art, and that's amazing. And I was like, wow, this is really resonates to me. We're a bunch of STEM nerds, but we really found the fun with the art and the creativity and the crazy.
The first immersive Van Gogh was launched in 2008 in Paris. Grande Experiences, based in Melbourne, created their Van Gogh Alive in 2011 and has expanded what's possible with immersive projection ever since. I recently flew to Melbourne, Australia to see the latest innovation in this space, the integration of free roam virtual reality. The leader in this market is Universe, based in Barcelona. They've built VR experiences for museums, cultural institutions, and even sports stadiums. As immersive art approaches its 3rd decade, audiences are demanding deeper immersion and more interactivity than projection map systems can deliver. VR is the perfect complementary technology to give today's guests the experiences they crave. Bob Cooney here, hoping to do a deep dive with Evan Shapiro, who should be joining us any minute now. And if not, I'll just tap dance and talk about it myself. Fuck it. It's how I roll. We are going to talk about movie theaters and the theater business. We're going to talk about cinema as a media. And then we're going to talk about some of the trends happening. So And for those of you that don't know Evan, you should follow him on LinkedIn. He's one of the savviest media pundits I've been following now for 6 or 7 years. He really looks at, he's been following kind of like the streaming wars since that trend kind of came about, kind of pre-pandemic, pandemic era. And recently he made a post about, he added cinema into the mix, which I thought was interesting because he's always talking about YouTube and TikTok and Netflix versus Hulu versus Prime and all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden he posted this thing. And here, I think I can share it with you. It's basically measuring up the median age of moviegoers compared to other. Oh, here he is. Let's just get him in here, man. Dude, I started without you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. We're pros at this, dude. We can just come in hot. Welcome.
Thanks so much.
So I was just so look, thanks for joining. I want to get right into this. I got a lot I want to cover with you, and I'm really proud. By the way, thanks for doing this. Like seriously, like I don't think we've ever actually spoken either, have we?
I don't know. I imagined just because your personality is so notable that we have, but that could just be my imagination.
You I don't know if you remember this, but I asked if you would moderate a panel at a virtual trade show I put on in 2000 called Show Up in the very early pandemic days.
Sure.
And you moderated the kind of diversity inclusion panel for me.
Right.
And
that's right.
did
That's right.
An amazing
Which is
job.
odd for a middle-aged. Yeah, which is odd for a middle-aged white guy to do.
Well, it was better you than me because I was afraid of it, to be honest with you, which is what I've been watching all the stuff.
Everyone is. Yeah.
Diversity inclusion, and you stepped into that because I was chicken shit. And so I appreciate that. And the world's changed quite a bit since then, but that's not the subject of this conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about your post about the the youngest median age of any media consumer. And I want to talk about how you discovered that and what that means from your perspective. There's some research that came out earlier this year from Fandango that also kind of tried to frame audience around movie goers, that I want to kind of compare and contrast some of the things that you see versus some of the things that they see. I want to talk, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the formats like premium large format and what you think about some of this immersive stuff going on with Sphere and Cosm and Warner Brothers diving into that. And then if we've got time, I want to talk about your journey as a thought leader in this space. And I don't know how you feel about that term. It makes some people gag. I certainly struggled with it for a long time, but
yeah, I mean, I prefer creator, because I think that's yes, I agree. It's kind of technically what. Say again.
Creator is way hipper.
It's a little bit more of the moment, yeah, and it's a little less old. So yeah, and I think it's closer to what I do. I mean, I think I do try to drive thought in our ecosystem purposefully, but it's based on shit that I want to write or stupid graphs that I want to make or podcasts that I want to record more often than anything else. So I think creator is more accurate.
Can I borrow that from you? It's obviously not your term, but I feel
creator. Yeah, no, I get a nickel for every time somebody uses the word creator, which is why you're hearing it so much these days. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, internet.
And so let's get into
the movie stuff. You want to start there? Yeah. I mean, let's start there. I mean, I was fortunate enough to do some work with National Cinemedia, Manu there, and NCMX, the group that does their intelligence. But this is Nielsen NPower data, so this is not any. This is, I don't think it's readily available out there on the open internet, but they did this. They do this research. on an ongoing basis. And this is, all movies in particular. This is from, I don't know where, this was from their presentation in particular, but movies, the median age are lower than Instagram and YouTube and certainly Netflix. And then you look at something like the NFL, which is one of the largest media properties on the face of the earth. And it's, it's not half the median age, but it's getting darn close. And crucially, over the course of a year, especially when you look at summer and fourth quarter, movies will deliver similar sized audiences of these demographics in particular. Because when you look at the share of, Gen Z, Gen A and millennials in the NFL or NCAA basketball, it's pretty small. Relative to the whole, as opposed to, movies in particular, I think is at least 60% Gen Z and millennials. So, people complain that the only place to get these cohorts or this young audience is on TikTok. TikTok is a great place to get them, but very few places have the sight, sound, and motion power of a dark movie theater where everybody's facing in the same fucking direction at the same time. And by the way,
and so
I get a lot of, is this true when I post this stuff on LinkedIn and other areas? Look at Minecraft movie, look at Sinners, look at Barbie, look at Minions, look at the most popular movie, the biggest titles that are driving the biggest attendance. And, chances are they're either targeted at Gen Z or Gen A and millennials, Gen X and boomers come along kind of for the ride. All the superhero movies and all that kind of stuff. But then again, Mario, Minecraft, Barbie, these are very intentionally targeted at these generations.
Yeah. Wicked and Minecraft are two that I wanted to kind of
Wicked, another one. Yeah.
Because you talked about, you just mentioned how, they're sitting there staring at the screen. And, we know that the younger generations, when they're at home screen, they're actually using multiple screens. On average, it's like 2.5 screens at a time somehow. I don't know where the third screen comes in, but, it doesn't seem like younger audiences really want to just sit there and stare at a screen. And we saw with the Minecraft movie and with Wicked, the sing-alongs and people, kids throwing things at the screen during the Minecraft scene. Like, what's your take on that whole thing? And
well, there's two major themes there. The first is that there are two ecosystems within media: millennials and younger, Gen X and older. And if you think you and I can really get inside the mindset of consumption of people who were born, or grew up not knowing, what it wasn't like, grew up without an iPhone in their pocket, a supercomputer in their pocket at all times, with the access to the world's information at their fingertips all the time. If we can't have the same perspective. They live in a different world. They don't just see the world differently. They live in a different version of the planet. And so you really need to understand how media consumption is different for Gen Z, Gen A, and younger millennials in particular. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is most of what most people our age and older think about Gen Z is not correct. I think there's a perception that Gen Z doesn't want to pay for content. Incorrect. Most likely to pay for content. Spotify, Netflix. I mean, yes, a lot of times it is their parents' account, but more often, especially since password lockdown or crackdown, that's not so much true, right? But movie theaters is another good one. And younger millennials and Gen Zers are more likely than any other cohort to go to some kind of event live and pay to go to it. This
music
summer,
festivals, right?
Music festivals, but music concerts in general are packed. I think the Taylor Swift concert tour was responsible for, a huge chunk of GDP.
Like $1 trillion or something crazy, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But that's indicative of all live is really, really back. And you look at things like the Sphere is a really good case study of that. But just live in general. And again, it ties back to that thing, the mythology around Gen Z, that they only want to stare at their screens. Bullshit. They love to go to. I was at a Coldplay concert in Mile High Stadium in Denver, and it was all generations. And there was Gen Z there, and there was Gen X there, and people put down, their screens and were present in the rain with Chris Martin. So the people do crave premium long form IRL big screen experiences as much as they love, especially Gen Zers and younger people love the short form video on social media as well. You have to look into the data and understand what they're doing, but very often the data will upset your conventional wisdom about people.
Yeah. And so, you talk about their willingness to pay and the experience economy thing's been beaten to death, right? And Joe Pine is about to publish his new transformation economy book, finally, hopefully putting the experience economy in the terminology in the grave. But movies, it seems like I was watching on YouTube and Instagram from Wicked, Minecraft movie, and it was taking me back to Rocky Horror, right? Which was, in the 80s, there was this, everybody my age will remember that, they had these special late shows and people would go out, and that movie's been running for 50 years. And so I just wonder if there's just not a bigger opportunity for theaters to embrace this, because they were turning away people showing up in costume for Wicked. Like, they were literally, like, people were coming with face paint and costumes. They're like, no, you can't come in here. And I just really struggled with the mindset of a venue operator who would turn away a paying customer who was so into the story that they decided to show up in cosplay. And I'm just curious about your take on that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think my major complaint with the whole movie experience is that it's not enough of experience often. That if you leaned more into, as expensive as tickets are right now. And by the way, cost is the number one blocker. When you ask people why they don't go to the movies, it's usually cost. It's not distance. It's not inconvenience. It's not even health concerns. It's the cost, because tickets have climbed very fast, faster than the rate of inflation. And so if I think you can defray that
to make up for the declining attendance.
Correct. That's exactly right. Even before COVID, the whole plan was not grow the install base, but to raise the ticket price, which had the effect of diminishing the install base. But I think when you look at, especially given the cost of a price of a ticket right now, the fact that millennials are willing, and Gen Zs and Gen As are willing to spend hard money, make an appointment to go to a theater, dress up, meet together, do social media there, then go into the dark theater and hang out together and watch the movie and have a sing-along and turn it into a social experience is a huge opportunity for the theatrical industry, not a problem. And I think most smart theater owners do see that. You see the Nighthawk in Brooklyn, you see Sony bought Alamo, and I think they're going to invest in that experiential thing. There are a number of theaters in the AMC chain or the Regal Cinemas chain that do encourage these more interactive nights, but not enough to, I think, to turn movie going into what it probably should be, which is a much more special night out. What's fascinating is you saw Wicked, and it drew a very young, very big audience for a piece of musical theater.
I know.
And it is so effective as a piece of experiential entertainment that you would think literally the musical is on screen. The replacement for the live show is in theaters. It's less expensive. It's now streaming on services worldwide, right? The replacement for the show is available basically for free if you're a certain subscriber. And yet Wicked on Broadway is doing better than it ever has. Oh. It's filling theater. It's a big theater too. So fandom, I think it shows something really important about this moment in time in the user centric era, and especially with younger consumers, is fandom, the depth of experience. I don't just want to see Wicked. I want to see every version of Wicked online. I want to see it in theater. I want to see it live on Broadway, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the new rules of the creator economy, but also of this user-centric era, where give the fan literally everything that they want.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. What about the the conflict between the different, you've split the media, the audience into two cohorts, right? Basically Gen X and older, and Gen and millennial and younger, I think, is where you cut it off, right?
Yep.
How do you see that? Are theaters going to need to start having different shows for different audiences so they can keep their phones on? Like the whole thing for me when I look at a movie theater, I did a keynote, an innovation keynote for the Immersive, the Giant Screen Theater organization during the pandemic, and I said, you guys really need to look at the sacred cows that you have, and one of the ones I called out, which they freaking vilified me, was turning off your phone. That's like the rule number one, and they've got high production trailers now before the movies that say silence your phones, turn off your phones, be quiet. Is that going to hold off, in the future, or are theater owners just going to have quiet show times and not quiet show times for different audiences for these movies?
Yeah, I mean, I think the experience really does matter, but I think programming a theater the way you might any other channel is crucial. And so if you think of a theater as an entertainment vehicle, right, or an entertainment platform, the big problem with a movie theater isn't that they can't sell Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's that they can't sell Monday at 11 a.m. And so typically they don't really program stuff there. And there are inventive ways that they have over time. But truthfully known, to your point, you should be segmenting every hour of the day. And there is no reason, I don't think, to not have family-oriented or parent and child-oriented stuff or educationally oriented stuff. But that's a huge investment in programming that most of these theater owners are real estate enterprises, not entertainment enterprises, not programming enterprises. So, it's about filling screens, but they're filling screens with also fill seats. And then it has to be the fewest choices, blah, 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 blah. We can get into the mechanics of the movie theater business, but they should be ripped apart to a certain extent. And what that looks like on the other side is you are programming more hours of the day with various constituents. That said, I think when you look at what's going to segment different audiences is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's dedicated to the young audience without children, typically, especially at night, who are seeing more pop entertainment, and it's more of a collective social experience. Weekend days, that's probably going to be much more dedicated to family-oriented audiences and those types of experiences. And then the rest of the week, if you want to get back to, let's say, 50% population, right now around 25 to 30% of the American population goes to the movies. And that hasn't changed. COVID obviously changed things for a minute, but typically it's around between 30% and a third of the American public goes to movie theaters. If you want to get more people to come, then it does matter about the product that you're putting up there. So on Mondays and Tuesdays, if you had a much less expensive ticket for library content in a movie theater experience that is targeted at people my age and older, I think you'd get a lot of people to come to the theaters, and I think you'd sell a lot of popcorn, but again, you'd have to sell it at a discount. A $20 ticket with a $20 tub of popcorn, you're not going to get seniors in this economy to come out to that. And I know that fucks with people's mental. Well, young people won't pay for it. Absolutely, they will. They will 100% do that. They will come to a movie theater. They will spend $20 on a ticket. They will spend $20 on popcorn, or they'll sneak their own food in, or whatever it is. But that's their big event for the week.
Yeah.
That's an investment. And they also don't have childcare, and they're not driving. They don't own a car. they're taking a ride share there, and you have to think about it very, very, very differently. And by the way, the entire meetup culture was driven online on social media for weeks leading up to the event itself, including content that they made for it themselves.
Yeah. So, you talked about different audiences, and one of the things, this is the Fandango report. I don't know if you saw it, but it caught my attention for a couple of reasons. And if you just Google Fandango Theater Industry Report 2025, it pops up. And they broke the audience down by loyal moviegoers and casual moviegoers, and they found that the younger cohorts were more casual and only go twice a year, where loyal moviegoers tend to skew older and go 10 times a year. And I'm struggling to get my head around that, first of all. And I'm just curious about how, if that's true, and the median age stat that came out of the NCM or the Nielsen research is true, how do you see these two coexisting? Because I'm struggling to see them.
I'd have to dig into the study itself. Yeah. I think probably it's, this is a chosen dichotomy, right? So
always, right?
Yeah. So I think if you split the line at, okay, how many do you see? 6, one every other month. But if you look at the younger cohort, you're talking about summer and fourth quarter. Typically, that's when they're going to the movie theaters. They're not going every weekend. The loyal moviegoers, I think what you're talking about is probably more of an art house moviegoer, someone who watches a documentary.
Because there's not 10 films a year that's worth seeing, right? Like the studios.
I don't know about that. That's not fair. That's not fair. There are 10 films nominated for the There are 10 films nominated for the Academy Award. So, at least
fair enough. I'm talking about for broad audience. Like, I'm assuming this is broad audience, though. This is mass market, right? This isn't, people who are
10 a year in theater is not mass market.
10
a year in theater is not mass market. They're not, most consumers
that's why I was
once a month to a movie. They don't, because of cost in particular. It's just very expensive to do that, especially if you're a family of 4, right? I would argue that there's a median age in here somewhere of millennial parents who go 6 times a year, and they go with 3 or more people. That doesn't seem to be captured in here, to be blunt, because this is, childless Gen Zers versus moneyed Gen Xers is what that looks like, or in particular. And then there's a cutoff.
Yeah, and even the income, it shows the income.
There's a certain age at which point that will curve down the other way, because your income curves down. It's kind of like television ownership. I own 4 televisions. Now I own 2 televisions. Anyway.
So the other thing, you talked about price, and the other trend that we've been seeing in the theaters, you mentioned already ticket prices going up. The other thing that's growing is percentage of premium large format, right? So IMAX and these larger formats, and 4DX more internationally than the US, but the US seems to now all of a sudden have woken up to that, and they're starting to install more motion seats, which I hate, but that's my personal bias. What's the and we'll use this to talk.
The sphere blows shit on you. It's like,
and we'll get to the sphere. I want to start
as well.
No, I want to start with IMAX and the premium large formats, which seem to really be driving ticket price or average ticket price beyond just the fact that they're escalating all tickets. And what does this say about immersion, right? So I'm the VR guy, and I talk about immersion all the time, and it seems to me that this is just further evidence that people are willing to pay more to be immersed in a story. And you think about, Wicked sing-alongs and Minecraft, whatever the heck they were doing, and Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like, this starts to move towards immersive theater to a certain extent. And I'm curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 ends of it. And I think that presentation you just went through shows the kind of dichotomy of it, which is there's going to be the aficionado audience who's going to be older, wealthier, more educated, and they're going to spend more. They're going to have a higher average revenue per user. They're also typically, taking everything else aside, going to be the probably the ultimate subscriber too. So I think another thing that explains that avid theater goer is that they're not just are they going often, but they're subscribers. They subscribe to art house theaters, so they kind of force themselves to go.
Yeah.
And then the younger user who's going to be more experimental, but they're going to increase their usage in IRL experiences. And I think, that's where IMAX is going to be like, oh, let's all get high and go together, or let's all not get high, actually, to describe Gen Z more accurately, and go together. Let's get high on life together and go. But I think they're also going to over-index for fucking planetariums, you know what I mean? And square dancing and music festivals and all these other things that we all, kind of took for granted. The other element to this as well is both constituencies are going to be very important as far as the membership model goes. And so, younger people they are the number one subscribers to Spotify. They're the ones who continually kind of pay money to go see Beyonce and Taylor Swift and all the other and smaller acts that they'll go see. Like comics and podcasters are selling out sizable 5,000 person stadiums now. Podcasters are, and so I think it says, first of all, know who your audience is. Really, it's crucial. And Angel Studios is another good example that I would throw out here. They fill theaters. They fill theaters with their members, and they have a great streaming service. Their depth of passion, their depth of relationship, their depth of constituency with their community is kind of the future of how small theaters, I think, will operate, and smaller publishers will operate. But I also think there's a lesson in there for anybody who publishes content, large format, small format, social video.
Yeah. What do you think about big events in a couple of months now? One was, I don't know which one was first, Cosm bringing out with Little Cinema kind of a reimagining of The Matrix for their big theaters, which I'm going to see next week in LA. And then The Wizard of Oz, tickets just went on sale at Sphere. Both of those with your favorite movie studio, Warner Bros., who you tend to love to hate on for their lack of strategy. I'm curious about your take of these big, expensive, immersive re-releases of classic movies, and why Warner seems to be so aggressive in the early stages of this, do you think?
It's fascinating. I mean, if you look at Warner, the studio, over time, I actually think they've been the most progressive with regards to giving the fans what they want. I mean, Jason Kilar famously moved a lot of releases onto Max, and I think it really helped a lot of those titles, and then he got fired for it. That said, they've also had a history of killing films. Coyote versus Roadrunner, and is it Batgirl? But recently, I think if you look at their event stuff and also what they're doing on YouTube with their back catalog, is very inventive as well. So, I think I'll go back to what I was saying before. Fandom is now so crucial. I think it drives the entire entertainment economy. I do think that the entire entertainment economy is becoming the creator economy. So if you look at the fandom around DC or Marvel or Barbie or Minecraft, almost all of it is driven by social media first, and then it turns into these realized successful actualizations in real life. The ones who aren't successful are the ones who fail to do that, frankly. And so, I think the giving the fans more of what they want in every shape or form right now, to take The Wizard of Oz, which is the origin story of Wicked, and draft off of the back of Wicked and do a big experiential thing at the very moment you can't get a ticket to Wicked on Broadway because the film was so successful, because people were showing up in costume at the movie theater. Yes, that's exactly what you should be doing. That is brilliant. I think Warner Brothers has milked The Matrix better than almost anybody has milked anything, especially considering how bad the last two films were. So,
the last two. The second one wasn't bad, but
I watched Stranger Things on Broadway. By the way, another Warner Brothers property. I'll give them more flowers. The Harry Potter franchise, one of the best overexploited, but best exploited franchises, considering how thin the IP is itself. 8 movies, but then Harry Potter World, enormous license from Universal, so they've got a competitor paying for them for that. And then the Broadway show was miraculous. Stranger Things, the Stranger Things extension there, like, this is the future of IP. It is the depth. Let the cult have every aspect of it can, and then find out a financial model around it. So re-releasing Wizard, re-releasing Matrix, coming back and revisiting the whole library. By the way, look at the live action Lilo and Stitch. Here's another great example. That shouldn't have worked. And yet it did, for 2 different reasons. One, the fandom there is real. It's real, and they knew it. Secondarily, they took it so seriously that they gave the audience exactly what they wanted, and it paid off in huge numbers.
What was it the audience wanted that they gave them?
A faithful recreation in real life of the original movie, not a replacement of the movie itself. It's kind of hard to, I think The Lion King failed where Lilo and Stitch succeeded. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, Cosm's getting $50+ plus food and beverage.
Right. But that's what people want a movie theater to be. They want it to be a real experience.
And and the older audience, I assume. I know when I go to movies now, I do the premium VIP, and I get a bottle of wine and I eat food, and it's a $150 night out for me. And so I think further evidence to what you're saying is that, and these older movies are attracting. It'll be interesting to see what the audience I'll pay close attention to what the audience age is when I go to Cosm, to try to see who's seeing this. I'm guessing it's a bunch of people my age that grew up.
Yeah, mostly will be.
Yeah, interesting. What and so let's talk about Netflix House, because you talked about Stranger Things, and that brought up. Are you tracking what Netflix is doing with this Netflix House thing at all?
Not really. No, I will be honest to say I don't know.
So they're opening. They took over 2 big box, 100,000 square foot stores, and they're turning them into immersive entertainment experience venues. One in Dallas, one in outside of Philadelphia, that are going to open later this year. And they've recently put up their hiring. They're hiring for people, and they've got basically different attractions, and they're going to be rotating the attractions from venue to venue. And then they just announced, with the announcement of that, they're going to open their 3rd venue, is going to be in Vegas, on the Las Vegas Strip somewhere. And so it just, you mentioned Stranger Things, and now they're moving closer in. Warner's kind of licensing IP. Netflix seems to be going all in on kind of immersive entertainment, owned and operated. And I'm just curious what you think of that.
I mean, I think
it seems to follow on your thing about give fans more of what they want. Like, these guys are really smart about that.
Yes and no. I mean, I think the gaming experiment hasn't proven to be as successful in that vein as they thought it would be. And that's, I think, more misunderstanding of the interface between their consumer and them on what device the consumer expects to see it. But that's a whole other thing. I think, yes, I mean, I do believe the success of Stranger Things has been, kind of the experiment that they needed to prove that they had a license to license like that. And I do think it's really smart. Netflix sees things that other traditional media players don't seem to see, or they see them first. The other classic example I would give you right now is they're scooping up all this YouTube talent and bringing it onto their platform. They're doing it at a speed and volume that not very many other people are replicating. And I think they'll continue to do that as long as it proves successful. We'll see. But in particular, I think in this case, Universal actually got to this space first, Wicked being the case study there. And they've had Mark Platt has been very successful in transferring Universal IP over to live entertainment. Netflix is, as they tend to do, following this trend and then improving upon it with this, I think, kind of rotating version. And I think what they're understanding is the limitations of traditional Broadway experiential is there's certain unions around it, but it also, there's only so many theaters that can house it. This gives them a bit more flexibility without having to go all the way to build a theme park to satisfy a certain segment. But again, to your point, this proves out, I think, that at least there's a major trend towards deeper experiential relationships between fans and fandom and certain intellectual property.
Yeah. How do you feel about virtual reality? What's your personal take on it as a technology? And you can come at that from any angle you want for now.
Yeah, I mean, I've long been short on virtual reality. I never thought it was going to be a huge adoption out there. People don't like to put shit on their face. Just the long history of consumer electronics proves that people don't like putting stuff on their face. And frankly, wearables in general, like the Apple Watch being maybe the exception that proves the rule, but it's mildly successful. It's not the most successful consumer electronic ever. And one might argue we would expect to see that growth curve continue at a stronger clip. So I just don't think people want to put distance between themselves, which is weird because they'll hold up a phone to watch a concert or film a concert, but putting it on their face is a whole other thing. So I think there's a tremendous use case in gaming. I also think the largest use case for virtual reality is going to wind up being in professional services. So medicine, architecture, education, frankly, virtual tourism, those types of things. Very kind of high-end use cases, not low-end use cases. That's I think AR, things like Pokemon Go and that kind of stuff is, and frankly, a more AR driven Google Map and those types of things. I think you're going to see higher adoption on a device that doesn't touch my face.
Yeah, and we're getting closer. I think the AI wearables are interesting, and Meta's Ray-Bans, they just announced Oakley's. People seem to love them.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them, but again, we'll see where the adoption curve comes. Like Quest is, I think, less than 0.5% of Meta's income.
Yeah, no, that's not about Quest. I was talking about the Ray-Bans with the AI and the cameras in them. Seem to be. They said they sold 3 million pieces last year, which is an awful lot.
It is.
So we'll see where that goes. Yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, but so I think the word of mouth on those will ultimately determine the future of that product.
Yeah. What have you done any of like the Sandbox VR Netflix stuff? Have you done any of that location-based VR shit?
No, I have not. Nope.
So are you familiar with what they've done with Sandbox with Sandbox, and they've just did Stranger Things. They've just come out with. They did Zack Snyder's zombie thing, and so they've done a bunch of VR stuff there. And then there's a new mod, and it seems to be relatively successful for an LBE. I still haven't been able to get my hands around profitability statements of venues and stuff like that. I'm still trying. But there's this new format that's come out recently. They're calling kind of large scale free roam. It kind of started in China and Europe, and now it's converging in the US, which is these like 10,000 square foot, 100 people at a time. You wear a headset, so everybody's got a headset, and you're going through this 45-minute long, story-driven, immersive experience. And
everybody's on headsets in the one location.
In the one location, but they're going through room to room, and so you're not all in the same
nightmare. I can't think of anything I would less like to do than that. Yeah, but you're right. There are people who will want to do that. There are people who go to silent discos. I just don't see myself ever going to them. I think we're talking about the edge case though. I don't think we're talking about a main, and Sandbox, other virtual realities, other metaverses in particular. I would think that Fortnite in particular, especially given Disney's recent $1.5 billion investment in Epic and Fortnite, Disney basically owns 5% of Epic now. So I think you'll see a lot more happen there. There's always been a ton of concerts. I keep waiting for a television show, a weekly game show to be done in Fortnite or in one of these other on Animal Crossing or some other Minecraft. Some other Roblox, some other virtual metaverse reality. I think a lot of that will still wind up being desktop as opposed to VR, as it tends to be.
You're doing what you said not to do, which is don't be an old fuck and think about the young audiences who grew up. So Gen A especially are all over virtual reality, and so there's and so and this shit happens really fast. Like you talked about, what percentage of the American population is Gen Z or Gen Alpha? Like you said, it was
58% is millennial or younger.
Millennial or younger, and this stuff happens really fast as you get older, I find, and so there's a game called Gorilla Tag, which I don't know if you've heard about, which has become now they're kind of becoming Fortnite Gen A. So they're over virtual reality, and I wonder. And again, now we're talking about I might be hopefully retired by then, and you might be thinking about it by then. By the time Gen A becomes where millennials are and really driving commerce or in the media industry. But I do think at some point, kids that grew up with virtual reality are going to be similar to the ones that grew up with cell phones in their pockets. But it's just going to happen way slower than I originally thought when I was
the adoption
5 years, 10 years.
Right, but the adoption data, AI has, I think, a greater chance of being that product than VR does. And it's just based on the pure adoption of the product itself. The data around adoption of VR, even if it's greater amongst Gen A than it was amongst the other generations, it's still a pretty low percentage. If you look at for example, the usage of VR and the usage of AI amongst Gen A, I don't know the numbers, but AI is
going to be really high,
much higher than VR, and it's a much younger technology. So I think that's what I follow. I think VR will be more adopted, more mainstream in 15 years when Gen A is 30 than it is today, but it'll still be a very small percentage of the population versus AI, which by the time 15 years from now, I imagine that somewhere north of 75% of Gen A will be using AI. Do you know what I mean? Like at work.
If we're still here. If we're still here, but that's a whole nother question.
Well, 15 years. I think we have a shelf life of more than a decade and a half.
No, I was talking about the whole AI apocalypse thing, but I'm a bit of an AI doom.
I think humans have a useful life for AI of longer than a decade and a half. 20 years we'll be around.
So let's talk. Thanks. Let's talk about. I'm curious, and this is much more self-indulgent. Like I've been watching you. 2018, 2019, and have seen your creator career really explode in the last few years. And you adopted this media cartographer label or moniker as you were building these maps. And I'm just curious, as you look back on the last 5, 6, 7 years of your career, what's that been like? Like you've become I feel like you've become a real celebrity in the media space. And it wasn't an overnight success. You've worked really hard at that. What's that been like for you?
Surreal. I always had a presence. I mean, when I first started running IFC, this is a long time ago, by the way. I wrote a blog called The Captain's Blog. And then when I was at Participant Media, which is now over a decade ago, I wrote a monthly column on Huffington Post. And in 2012, I wrote a piece called TV and Intervention, which really does, if you go back and look at it, it's still up, does spell out a lot of where we are today. What's fascinating about where I am is it started with getting fired by Comcast on my 50th birthday, and believing that my professional career was pretty much over at that point, that I was going to have to kind of really pivot full-time to teaching, to be blunt. Remembering why I got into the business of show in the first place, which was to create. And so from that day forward, I promised myself, and granted, I had a nice, Cabletown fired me, but they gave me a nice package to walk away and shut up. And what I realized is I didn't have to shut up. I could just talk about the things that I've always been saying all along. Make a career of it. Well, I didn't realize I could make a career of it. I hoped I could make a career of it. And so I set out, a while ago to build a brand around the stuff that I want to create. At first it was television shows, and that didn't go well either. So I got fired. I came up with a bunch of television shows to sell. I sold a couple. It's not a very profitable business. And then frankly, in doing all of that, it became very clear where the industry was heading. And I decided to basically offer what I have been paid to do internally at companies externally to everyone. At first for free and then charging it. And eventually I learned how to turn that into a business between consulting, but then often now a combination of charging for content that I make, whether that's speaking or writing, or offering expertise as a consultant. Regardless, it all comes through the front door of what I decide to create on a daily basis. What I decide to wake up and write or put out in the world or say is the driver of our business. And for a kid who moved to New York, dropped out of college and moved to New York to be a writer, director, creator, whatever, it's very, 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 very gratifying and very, very satisfying. But you're right, it is the hardest work I've ever done. And I do more of it than I've ever done any other work. I just feel that more of it is more enjoyable to me, more of it is more productive, and all of it is much more meaningful to me as a result.
What percentage of your day or week, however you think about it, do you spend just creating based on what the muse inspires you to create versus how much is demand response and stuff like that?
It's all in reply to the muse. I do get requests to do stuff, but it's usually manifested by what I'm already putting out there. And so, whether it's a podcast that I'm doing with Spectrum Reach, which we're dropping tomorrow, right? We had a great conversation at Cannes Lion with the head of Horizon media investment, Dave Campanelli, because Spectrum brought them and gave us a great studio to shoot in on the Croisette, overlooking the beach and Cannes. Come the fuck on, man. Like, I got no problems with any part of that. And it was a great conversation. And people will listen to it. And by the way, the last time we did an episode with Spectrum Reach, it was one of our most watched episodes ever on YouTube, because they really helped us promote it. So, you know, I don't do anything I don't want to do. I don't know anybody. Only other people I know who say that are other people, the Alan Wokes of the world, the Marion Renchette. Is every day perfect? No, but we say no to more than we say yes to, so that we can, you know, keep doing what we love.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. What advice would you give? I have seen you give a lot of advice to younger generations, especially in everything that's going on and with layoffs and video games and media and AI disruption and all that other stuff. What advice would you give to somebody who's been on the verge of, you know, they've been, you know, the first half of your journey, which is, you know, creating stuff and not necessarily finding a way to commercialize it or to get the independence or the freedom or the luxury of being able to work just on what you want to work at? Is there some sage advice you can offer people in that position?
There's a number of different, the problem with the world is everybody wants a one size fits all piece of instruction on how the world works. And that's not how it goes. The creator economy is going to be as complex as humans are. And so the first thing you have to ask yourself is, are you any good? You know, when a creator or a creative or an artist comes to me and they ask me for advice, the first thing I ask is, do you suck? So that is part of it. But let's assume your content is awesome. You really do have to understand the rules, the new rules. So everything is the creator economy. I said that a little bit earlier, but the rules of the creator economy are dramatically different from when it was created in the first place. It isn't just about clicks and views and ads and that kind of stuff. It's about it's about depth of passion, but a multifaceted way for those community members, not audience members, but community members, for them to relate to you with time and money. Part of my audience is valuable to me because they read everything I write, regardless of what I say. And so that's an audience that I can turn around and say to somebody who wants to lead thought, who wants to pay me to help them lead thought, I have great reach. Those consumers, I don't charge. It's on LinkedIn. It's my largest audience. I have another set of consumers, around 20,000, who subscribe to my newsletter. That's a different install base. That's a different economic model. That's a different part of the funnel. That is also part of what I sell from a marketing reach standpoint, but it's also a much better predictor of somebody who's going to pay me to come to a conference or for career advice or whatever that's going to be. So you really do have to build your own enterprise around the relationship your audience has, your community has to you. Size of audience isn't the goal here. Amelia de Moldenberg, who I interviewed at Cannes Lion, who runs a very important show called Chicken Shop Date. She has 3 million followers on YouTube, not 100 million. And she's crushing it. So it really does, you have to design it around the relationship you have with the community you have, and then back into a model around that. But it does start with, is your shit any good? And the data should tell you that. If you have a constituency and you're putting content out and it's not growing, that's telling you something about either the way you're putting it out or the quality of the data itself. That said, pivoting, it's not only about creating. Like the creator economy, there are people, Sean Atkins is not a creator. He's an executive. He is now CEO of Darman Studios, one of the most important creator economy companies in the world. He was featured in the New York Times this past weekend on an article about creators in Cannes, at Cannes Lion. How many TV executives were featured in the New York Times about Cannes Lion? Not any that I saw. So it is about understanding where we are in the media universe and the rules of them as well.
Yeah, wow.
I have to apologize.
Yeah,
I do.
it's good. We're wrapping. So I really appreciate your time, Evan, and all of your insights, and I look forward to coming across you in the real world some point in the future. Keep your browser open until the upload's done, if that's okay.
Okay, cool.
That'll give us a high quality copy, and it was good to see you in chat.
Cool. Thanks so much.
All right, cool. So that is that. Yeah, fascinating stuff. The media landscape for immersive entertainment is still brand new, and we don't quite know how it's going to play out, either in-home or LBE. I believe we're seeing proof points of audience willing to pay top dollar. We touched on Cosm. We touched on Sphere, premium large format. IMAX continues to grow. Ticket prices for all of that stuff continues to go up. And as virtual reality becomes, despite Evan's lack of experience, like he hasn't done a lot of the stuff that we've done, that I've done, to show what's possible in the virtual reality market. Seeing a lot of proof points there. The question then becomes, is there entertainment, a pure entertainment version of some of this large scale free roam VR stuff that's not gaming? So we see Horizons of Khufu is popular. We know the Felix and Paul space stuff is popular. They're building a 20,000 square foot venue, which I didn't get to touch on, with Evan in Vegas soon. It's going to open later this year. Black Mirror from Banijay, the Netflix property and universe, launches probably February in London next year. Will we see things like, Wizard of Oz, Matrix, move into virtual reality and take over some of these excess theaters that are underutilized? 17%, based on my primary research, of existing movie screens are obsolete or underutilized, like just basically gathering dust. And so what's going to happen with that space? Be coming to you from IAPA in Orlando this year. We'll be running a bit of a session on the metaverse meets the movie theater. If you're interested in that, drop me a message on whatever your favorite platform is. You can always go to bobcooney.com and hit me there, or LinkedIn, send me a message on YouTube, and I'll give you more information as it's available. So I want to thank you for your attention. If you have any questions at all, you know how to reach me, and we'll see you next time.